President Trump rolls out the red carpet and the honor guard and the military flyover, all for the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. And after all the pomp, there was actually plenty of real news out of this meeting. Plus, a neo-Nazi cult leader pled guilty this week to a horrifying plot to kill American children by dressing up as Santa Claus and poisoning them. I've got more scary details. These stories and more today, Wednesday, November 19th. I'm Caitlin Becker, and this is the New York Postcast. As expected, the House of Representatives voted overwhelmingly to compel the release of the Epstein Files on Tuesday. The final vote count was 427 to 1. Clay Higgins, a Republican from Louisiana, was the lone nay vote. And despite the overwhelming bipartisan support, Speaker of the House Mike Johnson issued this warning suggestion to his Senate colleagues.
The Democrats are rushing the release of thousands of unsubstantiated documents that may be included in this, that are going to be in the public domain with the passage of this bill. And there are serious deficiencies in the legislation that I have noted at length, and Republicans have to work to address those deficiencies in the Senate if and when this legislation is advanced.
One key deficiency, he argues, is that there are not proper protections in place to keep victims safe. And Johnson asked the Senate to, quote, correct those issues. Well, that didn't happen. The Senate unanimously agreed to pass the bill as soon as it's received from the House. Basically a pre-vote of yes from each and every senator, meaning they don't have to do the whole rigmarole of yay or, well, in this case, yay. That all adds up to the bill being sent to the president as is. And earlier this week, he suggested he would sign it if it lands on his desk. A wanted terrorist from Uzbekistan was able to get into the United States illegally and, after being released, got himself a commercial truck driver's license in Pennsylvania under Democrat Governor Josh Shapiro. The 31-year-old was arrested in Kansas earlier this month. The Department of Homeland Security says he had a warrant out for his arrest in his home country when he wound up here in February of 2023 during the Biden administration. He's been accused of recruiting terrorists and pushing propaganda, calling for jihad in Uzbekistan. President Trump gave Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman the royal treatment when he visited the White House on Tuesday. The Saudi leader was greeted on the South Lawn by an army-mounted honor guard on black horses bearing American and Saudi flags. And as the Crown Prince reached Trump's side, 6 U.S. warplanes conducted a flyover. It was a lot. The two were legitimately yucking it up together in the Oval Office. I am talking full-on belly laughing, and this wasn't even an official state visit. More like a diplomatic dropping by. But that doesn't mean nothing got done. Just the opposite, in fact. Let's hear the president explain it.
And I want to thank you because you've agreed to invest $600 billion into the United States. And because he's my friend, he might make it $1 trillion, but I'm going to have to work on him. But it's 600. We can count on 600 billion, but that number could go up a little bit higher, yes.
The White House says those investments will focus on sectors, including artificial intelligence and rare earth materials. And as has so often become the case since President Trump returned to the office, he then opened the floor up for questions. The two leaders were asked about the security and reconstruction of Gaza. Now, MBS dodged a bit on just how much his country will chip in before President Trump stepped in and seemed to answer for him, saying, quote, it'll be a lot. It's very important to him. And then things got heated. A reporter from ABC News asked about two things that really seemed to irk President Trump. First, his personal business interests in Saudi Arabia. Now, he said he no longer had any control of the business and applauded his children for running it, including any interests in Saudi Arabia. But the reporter also asked about the death of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi back in 2018. Now, his murder was believed by some to have been orchestrated or at the very least known about by the Crown Prince. President Trump trashed ABC as fake news, but then answered the question for MBS.
As far as this gentleman is concerned, he's done a phenomenal job. You're mentioning somebody that was extremely controversial. A lot of people didn't like that gentleman that you're talking about. Whether you like him or didn't like him, things happen. But he knew nothing about it, and we can leave it at that. You don't have to embarrass our guest by asking a question like that.
I've got a tragic update on the story of the high school senior who was mysteriously found dead on a Carnival cruise ship. Anna Kepner's body was found on November 7th. And if you remember, the death was suspicious, not only because she was young and healthy, but because authorities wouldn't give a single detail about the situation. Now, the FBI has been investigating, and while there are still more questions than answers, we now know that Kepner was having dinner with her family on board the boat and said she wasn't feeling well. She returned to her cabin but failed to show up at breakfast the next morning. So I'm sure you're thinking what I was thinking here. She got some sort of illness that sadly killed her. But something is not adding up. Her family began frantically searching the huge cruise ship the next morning. However, it was a maid who discovered her body, wrapped in a blanket, covered in life jackets, and shoved under a bed. Now, once her body was found, the ship changed course and headed for Miami. The Post's deputy managing editor, Michael Zenny, has been tracking this story, and he joins me now. Michael, you got some new information late Tuesday night about the latest in the FBI's investigation. Can you walk me through it?
Yeah, this is really quite shocking. So this, what we've learned is that potentially the FBI is questioning her stepbrother in relation to this investigation. And this did not come from authorities. This actually came from an unrelated civil court filing that her stepmom had filed in the ongoing, I guess, child custody case. And basically, she asked for an emergency delay in a custody hearing in this divorce case, saying that one of her minor children is being questioned by the FBI in a criminal case.
Wow. That's interesting, particularly because authorities aren't giving any kind of information. So to dig up something like this is pretty shocking. I mean, do we even know if this is being investigated as a homicide at this point? It feels certainly, as we got the latest information about how she was found, like a homicide, but do we even know that yet?
Yeah, so far the FBI has been really quite tight-lipped. Right. We're checking regularly with the medical examiner. There is not a ruling on cause or manner of her death. We don't know how she died. Right. We know very, very little, very few facts about this case. But this sort of unrelated court filing really does seem like a bombshell that sort of shed some light, and the FBI is being tight-lipped. And in retrospect, it looks like part of the reason is probably because they have some strong idea of what happened, and they're just sort of like putting one and one together and making sure that, the case and the facts fit everything.
It definitely, again, feels like all signs are pointing to, foul play or homicide in this case. And to be clear, what we read in those documents didn't say that this child, or this minor rather, was a person of interest or a suspect, just that they were being interviewed in connection with this type of case. So maybe it's that this person knows something, maybe they saw something, maybe they're allegedly involved. That's still the largest questions we have right now.
Yeah, very much so. And it sounds like there probably will be an announcement soon, but we really do not have any of those details confirmed just yet.
And outside of this court filing that we dug up at the Post, has the family been saying anything?
So her father has spoken out a little bit, mostly to say that he's it's a private family and that they're really shocked and rattled by this. And he's also said that the FBI has said very little to them, which actually in retrospect makes a certain amount of sense, especially if, someone in the family is being questioned or possibly eyed as a suspect in this case, or a person of interest. The other thing is, what we're hearing is really, really sad stuff. This seems like a young woman who had, sort of the world at her fingertips. She was a cheerleader, a straight A student, someone who was like beloved by her friends and classmates. And this really seems like a shocking death to everyone around her, and her family really does seem crestfallen.
And from where we're sitting, it does feel like this is really the beginning of the information that is going to come, sort of trickling out, and some twists and turns ahead. So I'm sure we will absolutely have you back on as this story develops. Michael Zenny, thank you so much.
Thank you.
A neo-Nazi cult leader has pled guilty to plotting a New Year's Eve attack in New York City. The plan? Well, you won't believe it. He wanted to use a terrorist dressed as Santa Claus who would have handed out poison candy to children. The 22-year-old from the country of Georgia is known as Commander Butcher, which off the bat is just terrifying. And he admitted to soliciting hate crimes, providing instruction on how to make bombs, and also how to use the poison ricin. It was all part of his international group called the Maniac Murder Cult, which again is terrifying but sounds pretty on the nose. He's also said to have inspired mass shooters with something called Hater's Handbook. Truly, the whole thing is so evil, it sounds made up. Now, this all began when he traveled to New York in 2022 and encouraged others to carry out hate crimes on behalf of his cult. Now, with all his hateful plotting, clearly he didn't do a crack job at vetting recruits, thankfully for all of us. And one of those recruits happened to be an undercover FBI agent. Now, this terrorist pled guilty in a New York City federal court this week after being hauled back to the U.S. from Moldova, and he faces up to 40 years in prison, which to me doesn't nearly sound like enough. And finally today, some sad news to share. Twin entertainers from back in the day, the Kesler sisters, have died by assisted suicide at 89. Alice and Ellen Kesler were born inside Nazi Germany. In 1952, their family fled, and then the pair became international superstars once they were free. They appeared on The Ed Sullivan Show, represented Germany in the 1959 Eurovision Song Contest, and made history for, get this, being the first female stars to show their legs on screen. That is how long ago this was. During the height of their fame, they were close with the likes of Frank Sinatra, Fred Astaire, Elvis Presley, Rock Hudson, all the big guns. Now, the duo told an Italian news outlet that they wanted to, quote, leave together on the same day. Now, assisted suicide has been legal in Germany since 2020, as long as the decision is made without outside pressure. And about a year ago, the twins joined an organization in Germany that promotes the practice. They met with a lawyer and a doctor to discuss it before they went through with it. They will reportedly be buried alongside their mother, Elsa, and their dog, Yellow. So depending on how you look at it, it's either really depressing or incredibly touching. And considering the news this week has been pretty bleak, I'm going glass half full and finding it touching. What on earth will the news gods bring us tomorrow? Well, you will have to come back and see. So don't forget, like and follow the New York Postcast wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, and I will be right here tomorrow waiting for you.